Good morning. My name is Samara Eisner and I am with
Sam Malone.
Today we are going to be talking about how to build winter holiday wreaths.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna show you how to take this store-bought wreath. This was purchased through Boy Scouts, correct? But you can also get like a basic wreath from like Walmart or Costco or Home Depot, any of the big kind of box stores. But this one is kind of plain, so we decided we wanted to spruce it up. So this is what we're gonna show you how to do, is to go from this to this. So next up we will show you kind of our arrangement of tools and the different material that we'll use.
All right, supplies are fairly straightforward for making or enhancing your holiday wreath. We have a glue gun, and this is a high heat glue gun. There's also low heat glue guns, but it's really important to have the high heat ones. Make sure that you have something underneath your glue gun for the drippings. We have made that mistake a few times. So just a piece of cardboard or piece of paper will work just fine. Some extra glue sticks, a wire cutter, and some florist wire is about all you'll need, and your pruner. All right, we're gonna look at some of the plant material that you can use to enhance your holiday wreath. Again, we're back with Arborvitae. This is really nice rich color green. Again, kind of fun to have these nice little cones on there. We have some microbiota that sometimes folks would look at this and think, why is it browning? This is very, very healthy foliage and adds a nice contrast. And we have the same coloration, but a slightly different texture with juniper.
Here we got some nice blue spruce, boxwood, and this can kind of have like some different colorations as well. You get kind of more like the rust colors versus green, and then the backside are nice brighter green. We got our soft texture from the white pine. This juniper has really, really great berries on it. Some do, some don't. We're lucky to have ours covered in berries.
A lot of folks like to add some nice colorful fruit to their holiday wreath. I teach this class every year for the last, 16 years. And I would say it's about 50-50. Half of the classmates bring their wreath inside and half keep them outside. So keep that in mind when you're working on your wreath. If you're going to bring it inside, you wouldn't want to use fresh berries. You may want to use some artificial berries. And it's kind of surprising. A lot of people think that they're going to use this in their wreaths, but by the end of the class, folks decide not to use them. So whatever works for you. Here's some pieces of birch that are really fun to use in a wreath. I oftentimes like to use both sides because they offer such different colors. And then we have some eucalyptus.
Then over here we got kind of our table of just different shrub material or perennial material you might find in your yard. So for us, we've got some curly willow. This is Russian sage, some grasses, fern fronds, pine cones, hydrangea, and then some birch, right? Yeah.
Filbert.
Filbert. Tricked me.
I know, they look so similar, similar.
I was like, wait, that's not right. So yeah, you can just kind of gather what's around your yard, what you think would looks really good dried. Anything's kind of fair game.
All right, now you've gathered your evergreens, and now we're going to start putting our wreath together. So step one is plugging in your glue gun. They actually take quite a while to heat up. So if you plug that in, make sure you put the piece of paper underneath, and get that going. The next step that we think is very important is shaking out your wreath. And the reason that we do this is because a lot of times these wreaths are made weeks in advance and then stored in a cooler to keep them nice and fresh. But a lot of times they're holding a lot of needles, brown needles, and a little bit of dead material. So we shake them pretty good, sort of fluff them up to give them a little bit more depth. And we kind of think it's important that we demonstrate how to do this.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so grab them by the back All right.
There
We
you
had
have
to
it.
do that. We had to do that for the Badger State. Okay, so the next step is gently fluffing up those needles and some of those boughs just to get them a little bit lighter. So this is one that we got from the Boy Scouts, and it's a really, really nice wreath. Sometimes you will buy wreaths from maybe the grocery store, and there's just one variety of evergreen in the wreath, and a lot of times that's balsam fir, and that's a very, very flat needle. So this has a lot of depth to it, but one of our cones is crushed. So we're gonna take that off, and then we're gonna liven it up a little bit. So we're gonna pull out some plant material, and we will be back. All right, Sam and I pulled some material that we wanna use to give this wreath a little bit more depth and a little bit more contrast. So we're gonna start with Arborvitae. I collected off of 2 different varieties, and you can see there's quite a difference between the 2, so I wanna use both. So I'm gonna cut them into smaller pieces and cut them in a spot where if I make the cut, I can reuse the next piece, and it looks very natural if I stick that into the wreath. So I'd snip this one right there, maybe that one right there. So when you're sticking your material in, you want to lift up some of the evergreens and just stick it down in there. And here I can tell that I made that piece probably a bit too long, but we're just gonna go with it. And you can stick it down in there and it should stick.
One thing to note as she's going around, she's keeping all the greens facing the same direction.
Yeah, so all of these evergreens are going in a clockwise fashion. So a few times when I'm teaching this class, I'll notice, or actually the participant will come up to me and say, something doesn't feel right. Why does it look weird? And then they're sticking the material in a direction that's not with the natural flow of the evergreen traffic. So I'm gonna go in the same direction that the material always started with. And I made an example wreath yesterday, and we'll show it to you guys in a little bit, but it was the first time that I've ever used a wreath where the base was going in the opposite direction. So usually they're going clockwise. The one that we'll show later was going counterclockwise. So we'll add a few more pieces, and you could just keep going as long as you want. Once you get started, it's really hard to stop just because it's so much fun. Another tip is to make sure that you're not just placing all of your evergreens on the same plane. So sometimes I'll see class participants, they're just doing all their evergreens on this top surface. And you want to make sure that you're also getting them up and on the outer rim of the wreath. All right, I think that's a good amount of evergreen. I think we're gonna transition to doing a little bit of spruce. We have some Black Hill spruce and some blue spruce. And this wreath doesn't have any spruce yet, so we're gonna spruce it up with some spruce.
That's a good one to get a lot of good volume on your wreath. Kind of fluffs it up really nice.
Yes. All right. Sam, would you be up for cutting me a few pieces of that blue spruce right there?
And a little shorter than that.
That looks great. So when I'm doing these on my own, and I'm sure that I like the placement, I'll maybe start with the one species and then after that go back and take the hot glue gun and put a little dab of glue at the base where I put it in. So like for example, this arborvitae right here, I'll stick it in and then put a little bit of dab of glue right there and then push everything down. And we'll demonstrate that later. Some people don't even ever glue because it sticks usually so tight. My wreath at home, I put on our front door. So that gets a little bit more action. So I usually like to glue them in. And when my kiddos were littler and I'd carry them on my hip to get into the front door, they'd always grab pieces off of the wreath. So I always like to glue my pieces in, but whatever works for you. And I really like how this blue spruce brightens things up. And again, make sure you don't forget about the outside of the wreath. And you don't have to be symmetrical with this. If you want to just do maybe the blue spruce all around the cone, that's something you could do. All right, we have some boxwood over here too that adds a really nice new texture to our wreath. This is one that you can make multiple cuts and get a number of pieces out of it. So I made a cut right there, two very natural looking pieces. And here I'm showing you the back side of the leaf. If you like that, leave it. And here's the front side of the leaf. This is a little bit big, so I'm going to snip one of them out. And I'm going kind of fast, so I just noticed that this wasn't stuck in well. But when you guys are doing it at home, you're gonna go a little bit slower than I am right now and make sure those pieces are really in there. And here you can see where there was a cut that I made it into two. But if you see that, you could just stick something right over the top so you don't see that cut. All right, Sam and I are now done with the evergreens. And we have them all tucked in, and now we're gonna add some of the dried plant material that we collected. So we really like the Dusty Miller in here because it brightens up the wreath a little bit. So pulling off these dead pieces at the end and tucking them in. Again, we'll come back and glue them. After we get them all in. We're gonna put some hydrangea in, and this hydrangea head would be too big for this wreath. So if you put it on here, it's like a big, I guess it could be a big bowl-like feature at the bottom. But you can pull the hydrangea apart and just get these little pieces that you can use. And these look really nice. And they brighten up the wreath a lot more than you think that they would. So tucking little pieces like this in make quite an impact on the wreath. Again, making sure that you put them on the outside and the inside. Okay, so we're gonna add some hydrangea. The last thing in this section we're going to add is some Miscanthus Grass. So these are nice in winter containers and work really nice in holiday wreaths as well. So I'm going to cut it to about 2 inches and then tuck it in this outer layer. So I'm going to stick it in so it's nice and tight and then sort of fan out the seed heads at the top. Some of these, even just the seed head is pretty big, so you can pull some of these bottom ones off if you need to. Sometimes I bend that, take that off and make it a little bit shorter. Up here, sort of fan that out. And again, that's adding a lot more texture. You want a balance of fine texture and coarse texture, and this adds a fairly fine texture to the wreath. So we're going to add maybe 2 or 3 more grasses to the wreath. And then we're also gonna add some milkweed.
Maybe. There we go.
All right, so again, hopefully everyone is, you don't want to take these from any natural areas, but if you do have some in your landscape, try to leave all the seeds behind. But this is really, really nice to add to a wreath. There's a little stem, and you can tuck that in, and it complements the hydrangea as well. So you can set these on your wreath, and then let's see, you're just not quite sure if that's where you want them. It really helps to take a step back to look at your wreath from a distance, whether you're doing it with a buddy. If you're doing it on your own, something that I do a lot is I stand on a chair, and it makes a big difference if you can see it from a different height. And that's a good point of deciding where the top of your wreath is. So I usually don't like to decide where the top of my wreath is until maybe I'm halfway through constructing it. So right now, I'm kind of thinking that I might keep this heavier cone towards the bottom left. So if I was up on a chair looking down on it, I decide to be my bottom, this would be the top. And maybe I don't want this hydrangea front and center at the top of the wreath. So maybe I'm gonna pop this one out and put it over here. And then maybe I'll decide that I don't necessarily want these at the bottom. Maybe I want, them spaced up in the right-hand corner of the wreath. All right, welcome back. So we have just finished up putting on these finishing touches. A few things we added that we didn't talk about earlier were these not dusty miller, but the Russian sage on the outside. And those are just on the outside, just to add another texture to the wreath. This is gonna be going on a darker wall. So this white behind it will really show up, but on this table, you can barely see it. So that's just a nice little finishing touch if you have the space. You have to think about the size of the space that you're gonna be putting your wreath. So if it's gonna be on their front door, you have to make sure that you don't go too wide so you can't swing open your door, so the plant material doesn't get pinched in your door. But if it's going to be going on a large wall, then you can go wild and crazy. And it's kind of fun to go wild and crazy with a little bit of willow. This is a curly willow. A lot of times in our classes, we'll have folks weave this in through the wreath like a ribbon. Or you can take some smaller pieces and sort of stick them on the outside of the wreath. So if you have this
personality.
Yep, it adds a little bit of personality, a little bit of character to the wreath, a little playfulness to the wreath as well.
Mm-hmm. So I glued down most of the material already, so if you tug on it, it's not gonna come out. Whoops. Apparently I missed one, but that's how you know. So some pieces I'll take out, put a little glue, and just kind of wedge back where it was. And then other pieces, yeah, this one I'm taking out. Other pieces I might go in there with my glue gun and kind of just put like a nice gob of glue and push the stuff down. So yeah, a really easy way to tell is if things pull out, you need to glue it.
So as you work around the wreath and moving your glue gun, some tips might be is to choose a place to start. Like maybe I'll start with my glue gun at the pine cone and work my way around instead of jumping all over the place. But if you do jump back and forth, even if you don't, you'll end up getting these spider webs all over the wreath from the glue gun. So you just have to go in and pull some of those out. Sam was really good about doing that as she worked.
I went too clean.
Yeah, she's very clean, very neat. But that you just want to keep your eyes on. And you might also want to put down a sheet of paper on your table or wherever you are constructing your wreath, so you don't drip hot glue onto your work surface. Okay, so this is where we are going to stop with constructing our wreath. Now you may be thinking that, okay, I'm all on board, I want to do this, but I don't have any of the plant material that Sam and Sam have to build my wreath. Where should I start? So we put together some examples just for ideas, and we're gonna take a look at them now.
Time out.
Oh,
You forgot.
what did I forget?
The hook on the back.
Oh, the hook on the back. All right. Okay, so the hook on the back. This is the bottom of our wreath. So this is very helpful to have a buddy help you put the hook on the back. If you don't, you might want to put your hook on before you start building your wreath. We did not do that because, like I said earlier, I like to decide about halfway through where the top of my wreath is going to be. So I've decided that the cone should be at the bottom. I'm not going to have it perfectly at the bottom. I'm going to offset it just slightly. So I'm going to have this off to the side, and the top of my wreath is going to be like right here. So then we're going to pick it up. Sam's going to hold it. And then I have this piece of florist wire. I'm going to cut it to be about 1.5 feet long. That's probably a little bit longer than is necessary, but be on the safe side. And then I'm going to double it. Okay, and then I'm going to kind of bend it in half like that. And then I'm going to find the back where I want the top to be, and we'll just use that little blade of grass is where we kind of want to shoot for the top of the hook to be, the top of the wreath. I'm going to go up. This is a good arm workout for Sam. Just to hold it for a little bit. Okay, I'm kind of struggling. So I'm going to go in a different direction and go down instead. So then I'm going to pull this hook up, and the tail is still in my right hand, and then I'm going to twist this tail around. All right. Okay, so then you have a nice little hook right there, and sometimes they're tricky to see. So a lot of times in a class, I'll take a piece of dogwood, or let's see, what could we use now? We'll use this piece of curly willow. And so you can mark where your hook is, so it's really easy to find. And then when you decide to hang it up, you can look for this piece of willow and then hang it up. All right, we will finish there, and then we're going to show you a few more examples, and we'll be back shortly. Okay, so here we have 5 examples of maybe starting points or jumping off points that you maybe want to use to get started on your personal wreath. So this would be an example of one that you could find material just walking around in your backyard. Here's a piece of birch that fell off. We have some fern fronds. It has a sort of winter holiday feel, but it's not screaming in the holidays. So that one is something that you could pull off pretty easily. If you are an herb gardener, you may want to have an herbal wreath. So in here we have lavender and thyme, some eucalyptus, sage, some rose hips, and some juniper. And for a little bit of splash of color, we have some petals that are still hanging on our rose and sumac flower. If you like the more non-traditional, you could go the really bright and sort of tropical feel. A lot of times in our winter container class, we have a lot of gold foliage that we offer, and that's a lot of really bright colors to make your wreath stand out. So we've got the browns and the golds and sort of something to tie those two colors together. And you know, we have this euphorbia in there, so maybe a little bit of blue spruce, if you could find that, would make it pop. And here's a little bit more silver and the sage sort of tying it all together. Next one you have is a more traditional holiday wreath where it has the birch and the red twig dogwood and some more dusty miller. So if you want to think about just the holidays, this would be a great place to start. Here's a little bit more playful. So if you're into flower gardening and you save some of your flowers, or if you have a friend who saves their flowers, here we have some dried salvia that looks a lot like lavender. And we have some pink gomphrena, and these pastel colors work well with some blue tones, some silver tones, and some buff, some poppy and filbert and cones. So those are 5 examples right there. And just one more example of a finished wreath. If you were lucky enough to have some of this gold arborvitae, gold juniper, gold chamaecyparis, that's a really fun, bright wreath that you could pull together fairly easily. There's a lot of leaves that hold onto their foliage, a lot of perennial plants that hold onto their foliage. And this is epimedium, you could tie those in. So just another example. Any words?
This wreath actually specifically had nothing other than this balsam, so it was
Yeah.
extremely flat. Like it was flatter than the one we started with
Yes.
earlier. So this is like a good example of you can take something that's like got no dimension to it and turn it into this. So yeah, you can kind of have a lot of fun with it, be a little wild, crazy, experiment with other things. There's plenty out in the garden or your neighbor's yard or the ditches.
If this sounds fun and it's something you'd like to try, go for it. If not, if this sounds fun but you want to do it with us, hopefully next year at this time we'll be offering this class. It's one that we offer every year. It's so popular that we're now offering it 2 times, one in the morning, one in the evening. So I hope you can join us for then. It's been really fun. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Bye.
Bye.